Welcome to True Crime by Indie Drop-In. Each week, we feature an episode from the best independent creators. Hit the subscribe button for more great true crime content. If you would like to help support Indie Drop-In, check out our Patreon at the bottom of the show notes. Today's episode is from NightMerica. Don't forget to check out the show notes for links to subscribe to NightMerica and follow on social media. Enjoy the show.
Begin.
NightMerica is an independently produced podcast. If you like what we're doing, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/NightMerica. And please tell your friends about us.
Welcome to NightMerica, a podcast that takes you on a tour of the abnormal, paranormal, weirdly true, and truly weird in every corner across this nation. Because, to paraphrase Ray Parker Jr., whether it's ghosts, aliens, monsters, or monstrous humans, there's something strange in your neighborhoods. Episode 18. What's up with weird ranches? I'm Aaron Sagers, one half of the hosting duo. It's like I almost forgot who I was for a second there. I'm Aaron Sagers, one half of the hosting duo of NightMerica from Travel Channel's Paranormal Caught on Camera, Paranormal Lockdown Evidence Revealed from Discovery, Paranormal Paparazzi, a lot of stuff. You know the drill. Joined, as always, by Brett.
Or should I say by Brett, because we're doing ranches.
We are doing ranches. I think
I did live in Huntsville, Alabama for a year, so I think I got a pretty good Southern accent.
I mean, if that's what just was, I'm going to have to disagree with you. You went into some sort of like Kentucky colonel kind of like, now I'll say here, we got a podcast up on our hands here. That's what you were doing. That's you. Mine is more of a, I don't know if you ever hear it. Somebody actually did pick up that I have a slight southern drawl.
Let me hear it.
It's funny because it's not like I tried to get rid of it. I just sort of phased it out. Or maybe I never really had a super strong one since only half of my family is really, really southern. But it's especially if I'm tired or I drink, it starts coming out. I can't fake it. It's like a, I don't know. Now I'm just doing an accent. Like, I don't know. It's like a loosening of the tongue. Did you have a French accent when you moved back from France?
No, not at all. Because my parents are from Southern Illinois.
Yeah, but how long did you live there?
Like 6 years.
Yeah. So.
Not really. It was hard because I would sub words like in France in school.
Like fromage. I would like a grilled fromage.
No. I would like the word notebook in French is cahier. So like in school, it was always just called cahier. So moving to Chicago, I would like talk about a cahier and like people wouldn't get it.
Yeah. Because
yeah.
That's like the least cool French word. Like if you had like a cooler French word, like
my favorite French word is caoutchouc, which means rubber.
Caoutchouc?
Like your rain boots are made of caoutchouc.
Caoutchouc.
Yeah.
Caoutchouc. That's different than cochon, which is pig.
Cochon? That's
cochon. Ah, yes. Oui. Anyhow. This has been a delightful detour. All you people that are listening to this podcast for the very first time, there's actually some paranormal and true crime stuff that's about to happen. It's not just talking about our accents and cool French words. Although, check out our new podcast, Cool French Words, dropping soon. That's not happening.
That's not happening.
So we're going to talk about weird ranches. Before we get into that, I think we should talk a little bit about just why ranches are so weird. But before we get into that, let's hear some newsy items. Britt, what's your weird news for the week?
I will say I have been having a really hard time finding weird news because there's literally nothing happening in the world. Like, in terms of weird news because everyone's trapped inside.
I disagree. Wait, hold on. There's a lot of weird stuff going on. It's like, I would argue there's perhaps more weird news happening.
No way, you're wrong.
No, we've even talked about it. Like, I think there's more paranormal activity or potential paranormal activity that's been going on during the pandemic.
Yeah, but I already did like 2 articles on that.
Well,
people gonna get bored.
So anyhow, you just didn't do your homework to find a good article.
No, I did. Okay. I did. I found something that I'm super excited about because it's a topic that I actually might want to cover on the show at one point. But yesterday, a new report from the NTSB, which is the National Travel Safety Board, came out saying that a plane vanished over the Bermuda Triangle.
Wow.
I am obsessed with the Bermuda Triangle. I wanted to do a story on it, but I also feel like there's a million podcasts who have done it really well. Supernatural by Ashley Flowers actually did one not that long ago that was really good, but
I like your setup there, that there's been a lot of places that have done it so well. So it's like, we shouldn't even try. This operation, let's not even... Other places have done it well, but not.
Well, this is something I was going to talk about in my main story, but one of the things I struggle with this podcast is like, do we cover stories that are well known or do we cover stories that are not well known? So I posted it to Instagram and like 93% of our listeners said they want stories that are not well known. So the people have spoken. Anyway, so a report came out yesterday that pilot Ken Simmons experienced spatial disorientation when flying over the Bermuda Triangle in February of last year, but the report just came out yesterday. He was a super frequent flyer. He would fly with his family sometimes like twice a week. He was not a novice. He'd been doing it for years. He was a vet, and he actually would fly to the Bahamas to do like freelance veterinary services, which is pretty cool. But that day he was on the plane with his wife and his 2 golden retrievers. Let's have a moment for the golden retrievers.
I feel like you were expecting me to react with that.
I know, you're heartless towards animals. It's fine.
That's not fair. But it was just too much of a softball. Mm-hmm. Felt too much like a setup.
The report that came out.
Retrievers.
I don't like golden retrievers.
No, I'm just kidding. I don't like Who hates golden retrievers? They're some of the most likable dogs.
They're so stupid.
They're not.
We just lost so many listeners. We're gonna get so much hate mail.
Not for me. I am pro golden retrievers.
I'm a wiener dog girl all the way, as our listeners know. But the report that came out yesterday said that he crashed 15 minutes after takeoff. And while he was in the air over the Bermuda Triangle, all of his systems stopped. Like autopilot wouldn't work. The compasses got all discombobulated, which is super common over the Bermuda Triangle. And the Coast Guard searched for a day and a half after the crash happened, and they couldn't find any sign of the wrecked plane. So where did it go? They don't know.
Did you say at the top of the story, though, that he experienced spatial
disorientation?
Oh, well, okay. See, I thought that the story was going to have a happy ending, like the guy made it back alive, but he's missing.
No, they're gone. They're totally gone. So, according to science, most likely what happened is because there were storm clouds in the air, he might have gone through 2 separate storm clouds to like weave out of their way, but the turbulence between the 2 storm clouds were so strong that it ripped the plane apart, which is most likely what happened. But I'm curious about the Bermuda Triangle. I think there's something weird, and maybe it's not supernatural, maybe it's not a portal to another world, but I think there's something with magnets and how it screws up all of these flight systems.
So just real briefly, one word. What do you think? What do you think it's magnets? That's what's going on in the Bermuda Triangle. Yeah. Not portal, not aliens, not interdimensional travel.
Correct.
Magnets.
What do you think?
I don't know. I kind of leave open the possibility for all of it.
Yeah.
Who knows? Could be weird. I do wonder occasionally, just because I am also a science fiction nerd, if it's like something where someone then gets transported to some sort of, prehistoric Jurassic age or whatever, and suddenly there's a plane
Wouldn't that be so cool that the dinosaurs then meet these two golden retrievers and they're like, what the fuck?
I don't think that's how it would go, but I think I would just be like, oh, a new thing for me to eat.
The T-Rex would be like, why are your front legs so long?
Yes. Oh, T-Rex. He's both the king of the dinosaurs, king of the lizards, and also the king of punchlines.
Someone cover my eyes!
Oh, that was a Toy Story quote, wasn't it?
It's my favorite Toy Story quote.
Yes. Well, my story, I mean, first off, the Bermuda Triangle, there's a lot of, we could do a whole triangle episode, actually.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the Bridgewater Triangle. There's one I discovered recently, I think it's called Merlin's Triangle, which segues into my news item. And there's also a lot to be said about ley lines, which are not really necessarily proven, but they're an interesting concept. But yeah, so I'll segue into my story then with the Merlin's Triangle. But in England, in Durrington, southwest England, scientists, archaeologists more specifically, have discovered a previously unknown prehistoric monument that is close to Stonehenge. And it involves at least 20 prehistoric shafts, which is more than 33 feet in diameter and 16 feet deep, on the ancient site where Stonehenge sits. So they believe this is a monument, Neolithic in age, created 4,500 years ago, also 4,500 years ago. And Stonehenge was constructed around 3,000 BC. So this would be, I guess, even older than that. And one of the archaeologists said it demonstrates clearly sophisticated practices, demonstrating that the people were so in tune with natural events to an extent we can barely conceive in the modern world we live in today, which is always crazy. Yeah.
It is so crazy.
No comparative prehistoric structure in the UK encloses such a large area as the Circle of Shafts at Durrington, and the structure is currently unique. And some believe that it was built, well, the team of archaeologists, not just some, believe that this was built as a boundary to a sacred area or precinct associated with Stonehenge. And that, of course, Stonehenge, we all know is sort of these big ritualistic structures and enclosures in the stone circle. And there's what's crazy is like throughout England in particular, there are these other stone circles. I've been to some of these other ones that, some believe are connected to solstices, which happened not too long ago. I think it was last Saturday was the summer solstice. Yeah. So, there's a lot of interesting connections between Stonehenge, and then there's connections to aliens. Some believe that these are either structures used to communicate with aliens, ancient aliens. Some think that crop circles are not that far away from Stonehenge, some of the famous ones, especially the one that was on the cover of the Led Zeppelin album.
I didn't know that it was so close to Stonehenge.
That was like communicating with aliens as well, or maybe something like Stonehenge or some of these circles were essentially landing sites, like landing ports for alien craft, all sorts of connections. But the thing that I just find from an archaeological standpoint that's intriguing about this, and this story comes from CNN, but it was all over the place, is just that, we still don't know a lot about this whole deal. So the fact that we're still learning about our ancient world and what our ancestors were up to is just pretty mind-blowing. Even if there's no paranormal connection to it, that we're still discovering stuff from 4,500 years ago. It's kind of
Yeah.
wild. But
What
yeah,
year was Easter Island? What year were those heads?
I don't know offhand. I guess I could look this up though. It was, I believe, 1200 AD, perhaps.
Okay.
Was
So
when
that
they,
was more recent then.
yeah, relatively recent.
Okay. Because I was wondering, like, oh, maybe it's something like these old civilizations, like kind of similar, but no, that was more recent.
Yeah, well, unless it predated them. So,
True.
but no, it seems like the Moai statues were around 1100 to 1680
Okay.
AD were constructed in that. So, the Merlin's Triangle, by the way, is another thing. Keep an eye out for that. I think you're going to be hearing more about that, but that's potentially connected to Stonehenge and some other
Cool.
circles. But ranches.
Ranches.
So we were talking about this topic, and what's up with weird ranches?
Dude, there's so many weird ranches.
Yeah. Well, from a paranormal perspective, there's Skinwalker Ranch. I don't know if you know a lot about that one, or what do you
I
know?
know a little bit.
It's basically a place where a lot of weird activity occurs, where there's indigenous people, spiritualism connected there. There's alien activity, supposedly. There's reports of cryptids on there. All sorts of crazy stuff is happening on Skinwalker Ranch. And then there's also, of course, which we're recording this on July 4th weekend, which is right around the time that the Roswell incident took place. And, that crashed on a ranch. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that happens on ranch. And you were mentioning another sort of famous true crime ranch story.
Yeah, from the true crime, there's, of course, the Clutter family, who is the center of the In Cold Blood book by Truman Capote. Honestly, probably my second favorite book of all time. And it's the story of a family, of course, that was massacred on their ranch. And then there's also the Wineville chicken coop murders, which was shown in there's like 500 versions of the Changeling, but this was in the most recent one with Angelina Jolie. They show that. And Wineville actually changed their name as a city because they were so horrified to be connected with these. So There's a lot of weird shit at ranches.
Why do you think that? Yeah, so, I mean, with that said, those aren't the stories we're going to tell, because these are pretty well-known, famous stories. Maybe we'll get around to it at some point, but we're still a young podcast, so we're just thinking about, I don't know. There's been so much written about Skinwalker Ranch and Roswell. Great stories, some really great writers out there that and great accounts that I just felt like set that aside for the moment. That was kind of your thought with In Cold Blood and Truman Capote's story as well. Why do you think so much is happening on ranches?
I mean, just off the top of my head, I feel like because it's such open space, there's not a lot around. From a true crime capacity, it's easy to get away with crimes because people aren't right on top of each other to, see what's happening, see what goes down, so you can get away with things a little bit easier. And then from like an alien incident, they got these like big places for them to land their ships.
Yeah. I don't know.
That's my scientific.
Yes, we're bringing a lot of hard science into NightMerica this week.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, I don't know how often the aliens are actually landing, but I do agree that the wide open space is part of that.
Open spaces. Sorry,
Don't sing too much. Look, I think you can only sing. I forget how much you can sing of a song before we have a copyright flag. But no, leave that in so everybody can hear your Love the singing voice.
This episode's going off the rails.
Yeah, it really is. Speak for yourself. I'm firmly on the rails. Anyhow, I agree. Wide open spaces, a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that said, not much has been said at all. But let's get into, before we get into the first story, let's hear from our sponsors. But let's not talk for a second. Let's hear from our sponsors, which is still us talking. And we're back. Okay. So let's dive into this first story. I don't know why. I feel like are you on drugs this week?
I don't know. I'm really tired.
You're slappy. Like you're punch
slappy.
drunk.
I got back from Phoenix this week, and it's a 3-hour time change. I'm quarantining before I go back to work, and I cannot adapt to this time change. I don't know what time it is. I'm really tired.
Mm-hmm.
But let's do this.
I mean, I'm glad you could share, though. I like it when you share.
Yeah. Everyone likes it when I share.
Yes.
Everyone on Instagram acts like I'm the funniest one, so thanks, guys.
Okay.
Yeah. I also run the Instagram, so.
Yeah, so kind of highlighting. Yeah. In fact, I feel like we'll use this public forum to hash this out. So you post a picture of your injured foot. So the NightMerica podcast is hosted by Britt and Aaron, and then I see this injured foot, and I'm like, I don't know what message this is sending to people whose foot is being posted out there. Do you tag your foot?
No.
As that shop girl, which is your personal Instagram?
No. And I comment.
I'm going to start posting my hairy legs, and then I'm going to just let it go and let people determine
honestly,
whether.
At this point with quarantine, ain't nobody seeing me. They could be my legs too.
God, if my hairy legs could be, no judgment for anyone that doesn't want to shave their legs, but if you could produce the amount of hair that's on my legs, I have hairy legs, people. Wow.
This might be our best episode yet.
Yeah. It's going to be a steep drop off of subscribers after this one.
Steep.
Let's maybe talk about, instead of legs, something, tragic. What's your story?
As I was saying before, I was not wanting to do these super well-known stories. So I was doing some digging and actually found this really interesting story from my new favorite website, modernfarmer.com. It's actually a really well done website and had this incredible article by Andrew Amelinks. And then I also got a lot of information from the super old newspaper, the Taconic newspaper, an article by Alan Merritt. This crime that I'm about to talk about happened in 1930. So it's fun to see like all these really old school papers. There's a lot of good stuff on the internet, guys. So it's Thanksgiving Day, 1930. And Bernice Germund is on the bus home from her college in Poughkeepsie and is dropped off at 5:20 at her family ranch, which is about 90 miles north of New York in a really small town called Stanfordville. She says to the bus driver, "The house is dark," which was really unusual, but she wishes the bus driver a happy Thanksgiving and gets off, not knowing what she was about to walk into. Bernice's dad, his name is James, he was a dairy farmer for Borden Dairy. You guys know it. It's like that really adorable smiling cow that has the daisy chain necklace.
Is that Elsie? Is that Elsie the cow?
It might be. She's like this real happy cow.
Iconic mascot.
Yeah. So that's who Bernice's dad, James, works for. Milk was their livelihood. They had all the dairy cows on their ranch. And when he didn't show up on Thanksgiving Day to make his delivery, people were kind of curious, but they didn't think too much of it because it was a holiday. Then the next day, he didn't arrive again, and people got super concerned. So a fellow employee named Willard Coons went out to their family ranch to see what was going on. He gets there at 9 a.m. the day after Thanksgiving. and walks into the barn and see the dairy cows are in desperate need of milking. For reference, dairy cows need to be milked like 2 to 3 times a day. Don't get me started on milk consumption in this country, but they clearly had not been milked for 2 days. So he knows something is up. He walks over then to the tool shed and finds James, as well as the 10-year-old son Raymond, lying on the ground, soaked in blood, covered in stab wounds. He's terrified. Willard runs into the house and sees Mabel, Bernice's mom, the mom of the family, laying by the kitchen stove, frozen in blood, because it's the 1930s and it's upstate New York in November. It was super cold that like the liquid around her froze.
I did not know that blood could freeze, but
I didn't either, but it's super gross. Bernice was laying huddled under the dining table. An investigator said in her position, it looked like she had walked into what was happening to her family, crawled under the table for protection, but nevertheless was stabbed. And they described her stabbings like she had been hit like a pincushion.
Ooh.
Which is a gross visual. So Willard ran a mile away to where James's brother lived, got him for help, and then on the way back past Arthur Curry, who's their neighbor, and they all went running back to the house to see what's, going on. Arthur suggests they go in to make sure the killer's not still in the house, which is kind of a creepy choice for me, but of course the killer wasn't. So then things happen in the way that things typically happened in the 1930s. The police are notified, but it takes them a little bit to get there. So in the meantime, neighbors come to peek in the house and see what's going on and totally disturb the crime scene. Reporters noted that people were taking souvenirs from the house, and since it was Thanksgiving Day, people were eating their Thanksgiving food. How disrespectful.
Just a quick aside. Well, yeah, the food part is kind of disrespectful, but there's a lot of stories of these crime scenes, especially in this era, like the Villisca axe murder house. People also went in and disturbed the scene and took souvenirs. So apparently,
yeah.
Not that I think people wouldn't do it today. I think people would still do it, but
they totally would. Just but now the police got it on lockdown.
Yeah, but sorry, continue.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that because the police were actually part of the problem. While they were doing the sleuthing of this case, they were eating one of Mabel's pies. So there's that. They did, however, find a new butcher knife laying at the scene, but it had been completely wiped clean, no blood, no fingerprints or anything. And they didn't dust for fingerprints because so many people had been in the house. They figured, it would be such a disturbed crime scene.
Was fingerprint technology even...
Was it around back then? I don't know. The newspaper article said that, so I assumed it's true. But
I didn't think it had been 1930s? Yeah, I guess so.
I don't know. I know DNA definitely wasn't. That was the 80s. But.
Yeah.
So according to the autopsy reports, Mabel was killed first, then Bernice, followed by James, and then Raymond. So what they kind of puzzled together is maybe James was out working and Mabel was in the house. Whoever killed them came in, killed Mabel. Bernice walked into the situation, and then Raymond ran outside to his dad to tell him what's going on. But that, of course, is all speculation. We don't know what happened. The author of the article that I read on Modern Farmer wrote my favorite line. It said, police were long on theories and short on facts. The family was a mild-mannered, working-class family, no enemies. They weren't incredibly wealthy, but they also weren't in a lot of debt. They were just living life like your regular farming family. Some people claim to see a strange man wandering near the farm that day. One shop owner even said a suspicious Spaniard bought a watch with a red stained $10 bill. But police picked up this suspicious Spaniard, and none of the witnesses could pick him up out of a lineup. So, I mean, eyewitness testimony is also like super suspicious, but
and also
another episode.
Pretty racist. Like,
Super
anytime
racist.
describe someone as like swarthy or whatever.
Yes.
It's definitely
racist.
Racial profiling there.
Yes. Theories also went around about Bernice because she had been stabbed the most out of the family. Maybe it was like a guy she dumped who then came in to take revenge, but nothing really came of that either. What's interesting is that 2 weeks after the murder, James's wallet was found 2 miles away from the home, completely emptied, and he had cashed a check just like 2 days prior. So they suspect there could have been cash in there that was stolen. I mean, probably, but who knows if all the cash was kept in that wallet. But guess who steps in to weigh in with his 2 cents? The governor of New York at the time, Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Never heard of him.
FDR lived like 20 miles from the crime scene, and he was super unhappy with how local police were handling the case. So he appointed the attorney general to take it over. To be fair, this is a super small town, and the police were completely in over their head. It's like a small farming town, but most people probably did would like steal each other's cows. There was never been a brutal family murder. But also on the other side of that coin, it was also kind of a corrupt town. Prohibition was going on, and the police in town were friendly with the locals that ran stills that made like Applejack, like the booze of the time. And they actually would take kickbacks from these people to keep from arresting them. So the new attorney general is now in place, and 2 years later, we finally have our first suspect. And it's a name you've heard before, Arthur Curry. He was the neighbor.
Arthur Curry is also the name of Aquaman. So if this story ends up being that Aquaman committed these savage murders, I'm going to be so disappointed and writing a sternly worded letter to Atlantis. Did you know Aquaman was Arthur Curry?
Is Aquaman Jason Momoa?
No. Jason Momoa portrayed Aquaman.
So handsome.
Yeah. Well.
Hubba hubba.
Yeah, I've hosted for Jason Momoa multiple times.
He seems like a super nice dude.
But he portrays Aquaman. But, I still prefer my Aquaman as, from Super Friends and whatnot. Either way, Arthur Curry. His Aquaman. His Earth or his land name.
Yep, got it. Well, Arthur Curry, the neighbor, had served time for assault, was known for having a terrible temper. He was also a chicken farmer and a barber. And if you know Sondheim musicals, you know barbers are no good. But he also was a bootlegger, so he was friendly with the police. So maybe that's why it took someone new in place to get the first suspect. Turns out, Arthur told his wife on the day of the murders that he was heading over to see James because James owed him money. He came home around 7, which Bernice got off the bus at like 5:20, so the timeline does kind of check out. But that was all they had in terms of evidence. So the police prosecuted him, and their court case argued that Arthur wanted to hunt on the Germans, I don't know how to pronounce their last name, wanted to hunt on their ranch, but the family told him no. And also that the family owed Arthur around $400 in like today's money, and that he went over to this family and lost his temper when they didn't pay him back and killed them in the heat of the moment. But they lost the court case because there was serious room for doubt. There was like no real physical evidence tying him there. And the wallet that had been found was 2 miles in the opposite direction of Arthur's home. But that was like weeks later. And so, Arthur could have dropped it there at any time. Personally, I'm leaning to Arthur. If, he was a bootlegger, good with the cops, and they had like beef, But at this point, what's interesting is that FDR is now elected as president. So the heat is off of the attorney general to put like an end to this case. So they all just kind of stop fighting for justice, and this case is still unsolved. And that's the death on a dairy farm murder.
Okay.
What do you think?
Well, I think that you would think that as president, FDR could have still put some pressure just to solve that crime. But I think it was actually an FDR quote that self-interest is the enemy of all true affection. So he could have been, I guess he got caught up in the White House and couldn't put the pressure on. But other notes, Arthur Curry gives a bad name to Aquaman. Yes, and just a random aside, it was Elsie the cow, by the way, was the dairy cow, and she has a burial spot in Plainsboro, New Jersey. Her real name was Yule Dew Lobella. I guess Elsie was like her super name, Lobelia.
Sweet.
But that is an odd story. Yeah, it's I don't know automatically that bootlegging would make you violent, and the nature of the crime, man. I mean, it could be a heat of the moment, but the way you described the murders was not just in a fit of rage. It gets pretty personal when you.
Yeah, super personal. Stabbing is so personal.
Yeah, well, and then frozen in blood is pretty.
Ew, it's so gross.
But wow. I did not know that one, so that's an interesting new ranch. Again, ranches be weird.
Ranches be weird.
All right, well,
ranches be weird.
Ranch.
That's bad.
Yes, it was bad. But let's continue to the next story. But after a word from our sponsor, and we're back. Well, I think that, so you brought something new. I had not heard of that one before. And I was looking for something fresh as well. Again, didn't want to just retread some stories that are great, but are kind of out there a lot. And I was looking up, this is actually a relatively new article from Outside Magazine, outsideonline.com. And it was written by A.C. Shilton. And this is the story of Flathead Lake Lodge. And this is a pretty new-ish story. And I'm leaning really heavily on the Outside Magazine on this because it was their story. I have not seen references to this beforehand. So I want to give that AC and Outside a lot of credit on this. Now, Flathead Lake Lodge, as it is supposedly the home to a Loch Ness monster type creature, or actually more like Flathead Lake itself is supposedly home to a Nessie type of creature. But interestingly enough, that's not the story. I mean, that's already weird in of itself. But this is this lodge. It was Doug Averill is the retired owner and manager of the Flathead Lake Lodge in Montana. And as he tells Outside Magazine, Doug grew up as one of 8 boys. His parents owned this massive dude ranch. And as a kid, these boys would run around wild. And he said, quote, "We rode around as a little gang of cowboys," which sounds pretty great, actually.
Super great.
Imagine 8 boys. They'd saddle up, they'd take off on the ranch, and then also check the cattle, check the land that the family owned and operated. And this is pretty remote rangeland. Now, in the 1960s, it was summertime. The brothers, I don't know how many brothers were on site, but the brothers came across, quote, "a ghastly sight." And on the ground were 3 dead cows. and they were arranged sort of in a circular fashion. Now, this is noteworthy because no obvious wounds were visible, their reproductive organs had been removed, there was no blood, and Averill remembers it was almost surgical removal. Now, this is part and parcel exactly the kind of thing that has been reported with other cattle mutilations. Typically, tongues, eyes, sometimes all of the major organs, a lot of times the reproductive organs are removed. No blood in the body. If you look at some of these images, not connected to this story, but in general, if you look at some of these cattle mutilation images, it almost looks like these cows have been sucked dry, like they're just this empty sack.
And a
cow vampire, but no blood anywhere. And if it's one thing I've learned from vampires in pop culture is they're very messy eaters, but there's no wound marks. So somehow like surgical removal, no blood. I mean, that right there is just so odd. That's something I always find very peculiar about cattle mutilations, the lack of blood, the lack of just stray viscera.
Are cows just not really bloody?
No, they're very bloody. And the sort of almost like something was like a laser or something incision. But anyhow, so, okay, this was in the 1960s. He reports this. Now, it is worth noting that in the 1960s, this was definitely peak alien obsession. There were sightings of aliens or UFOs, flying saucer sightings in the newspapers. So, Averill kind of thought maybe, this was the purpose. And a lot of people tend to think that the aliens were taking these reproductive organs for testing. Anyhow, that said, though, Averill said at one point they found, this was after the fact, one day he was walking around and he found a lance in their path, basically something pinned to the ground with a cryptic note that said, it was a cryptic note with a threatening message. And he did not go into detail about what that threatening message was, but for him, he thought, oh, okay, maybe it was people that did this to the cows. Okay, so cattle mutilation, and then a letter with a threatening message, so then they think, oh, okay, aliens, oh wait, no, maybe people. But then things continue to get weird. Things got odd on this ranch. For instance, the brothers go to grab hamburgers, and they leave. This is actually at a local bar, so slightly off the ranch. They go to a bar to grab hamburgers. They leave their horses in the back of a truck. The horses were packed in tightly. We've seen these horses on trucks, and they said that they were only away for a couple minutes, but when they came back, the horse packed into the middle of the truck was suddenly out. And there was no signs of a struggle, and they didn't know how this horse could get out of the back of this truck, this stock truck, without all the other horses being unloaded. And if it was only a couple minutes, there's no way that you could take all these horses off, take one out, separate. It sounds like almost like an elaborate prank. Like, okay, bring them all off, separate this guy, put them all back in, but that would take a lot of time. Okay, then the next day, there was a new guy working on the ranch, fell off his horse and was badly injured. Okay, maybe coincidence. But apparently they were all riding together and nobody saw this happen, which is weird. And this was, again, a pretty experienced wrangler, but so severe that he was permanently disabled. Okay, then another weird thing happens. So there was this cook that worked on the ranch and went out to meet the brothers to hang out and go for a ride. And the tailgate on his truck had gone missing somehow. He loaded up the truck and then the tailgate was suddenly gone. And as a result, his horse fell out of the truck. And this is just terrible, had been dragged behind the vehicle.
Oh my God.
So just again, he loads up the horse. He's going to go meet the brothers. He's carrying the horse in the back of the truck, like a stock truck. And somehow along the way, tailgate goes. Didn't hear it, which would just, would make a lot of noise. You would certainly notice if suddenly the tailgate on your truck had gone missing. And then the horse fell out and somehow was dragged along, and they had to put her down.
He didn't hear the horse whining?
Guess not. And this was like really this prized horse for the cook.
Oh.
Her name was Betsy, by the way. And that
the cook or the horse?
No, cooks are typically called Cookie, I think. According to ranch rules, it would be Cookie. Or at least in my mind. No, I don't know if that's actually true. But
you said that like with such assurance.
Well, in my mind, anytime it's either a cook or a very eccentric guy on the ranch, or haven't you ever seen cowboy movies? Like I'm Cookie. I'm Cookie. You dang nabbit back. You guys are you messing with my stew. I'm Cookie.
So the horse's name was Betsy?
Yes. You gave me zero reaction on Cookie. Got to get Cookie on the show for an interview. Anyhow, Betsy, they had to put down Betsy, which just broke his heart. So all those things were connected in their minds. So then time goes on and they start telling these stories around the campfire. And then recently, so this is kind of weirdly continuing on this ranch, Avril, who is apparently still on the ranch, heard about this buffalo that had been killed or whatever in some of the remote parts of his ranch, and reported seeing a pack of 16 wolves. And the two weird things about that is normally wolves would not go after a buffalo, and 16 of them, I mean, I suppose if they're really starving or whatever.
Yeah.
But 16 wolves.
That's crazy.
So Avril, during this investigation, he finds the bull, and the bull is dead, but there's no bullet holes, there's no wolf teeth marks, there's no gashes on the corpse, and imagine, this is Montana, there's a lot of scavenging animals and birds and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Nothing had touched this thing.
What?
So not even the buzzards, aliens. Which was really unusual. Aliens. And again, and this is more recent, the bull's reproductive organs were gone, the buffalo's.
Why?
And again,
what are you freaks doing with the reproductive organs?
Snow-covered field, no footprints in the snow around it or anywhere in sort of this mile-long walk back to the ranch from the nearest road.
Aliens. Perverted aliens.
It's weird, but he says that he thinks that he wishes it was aliens, but thinks it was humans because of the note and then the spear that had tagged the threatening message to the ground.
Aliens probably can write. They can build those wax spaceships.
Yeah, but why would they bother sending a threatening message?
Because then we think it's humans.
I don't think the aliens need to play that game. They can just be like, hey, we're aliens and we're taking over. If that's really what they wanted to do.
But what would humans do with reproductive organs?
Well, I don't know.
Do they eat them?
Well, actually, there have been stories, or there's been accusations of cult-like activity. And that, a lot of things always get pinned on the Satanists, but it's cult-like activity. Even if that was the case, I mean, I could imagine that some people would use some of that for rituals, but the surgical precision doesn't quite make sense, and the lack of blood anywhere doesn't make sense. So, that's kind of odd. But so apparently there's still some weird stuff happening at the Flathead Lake Lodge, which you can actually go visit. It's been in operation for 75 years, so flatheadlakelodge.com. This podcast is not sponsored by them, but this is a odd story, and a relatively recent one that I just kind of like, because it has the markings of, has a lot of like, sort of, if you want to think, potential weird crime against this family, or maybe aliens. Not saying it was aliens, but maybe aliens.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. So, Ranches Be Weird.
Ranches Be Weird.
Maybe that's the new title of this podcast. Ranches Be Weird. Anyhow, so before we wrap things up here, let's dive into what we are interested in from a. Well, I didn't get your reaction on that. Well, you think aliens? Anything else you think with that?
Oh, I think it's aliens for sure. I think
but the
it's
spear in the ground.
Aliens got spears? You've watched Star Wars. They have weapons.
I'm just don't even know how to respond. I feel like you're just saying that to frustrate me.
Why?
Star Wars, they have lightsabers. And not everyone is using lightsabers, but the Jedi. And the Jedi are like they're like a monastic samurai order. They're sort of peacekeepers. But they're not, they use that. But not everybody is using lightsabers. They normally use blasters and the other guys
use spears.
Which other guys?
I don't know. Who are the robots all in white?
Well, those are stormtroopers, but they're not robots. They're actually people in there, and they used to be clones.
But do they use spears?
No.
Oh.
I
think there are spears in space.
There are Imperial guards who use like a staff similar to like a bow staff. I suppose you could think of that as like a spear, but that's sort of an Imperial guard there, and they're not. And I don't think I've seen any of them throw.
Aliens found a spear on the property.
Why?
Why not?
Why
Throw
would
off
they?
The trail.
What trail? An alien doesn't need to be throwing anyone off a trail. When you're an alien, when you're an advanced civilization, and you could just come in from another place, you don't need to throw someone off your trail.
I don't know. What do you guys think? Hit us up on the social. I want to hear everyone else's opinion.
Yeah, I want to hear from all the people that thinks it's the Star Wars stormtrooper spear-wielding aliens.
I mean, listen, I built up
Lake
our
Lodge.
social media following, so they'll probably side with me. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, questionable. Anyhow, paranormal pop culture. What are we into this week?
Obviously, I watched the entirety of Unsolved Mysteries. So good. Every episode was good. Nothing disappointed. It was awesome. I like that they didn't have a narrator, because then Robert Stack could just be him. You can't really replace him. My favorite episode was episode 3, which was the French family, of course. Did you watch it?
I actually have not watched it yet.
I would recommend for you starting with episode 5. That's
I can't work that way.
Berkshire UFO incident.
I would have to. I do know that incident. I would have to start episode 1. I'm very kind of chronological that way.
Yeah. But it was great. Highly recommend. What about you?
Do love Robert Stack. Have you ever seen the movie Airplane?
No, but I've seen that clip that's like, "Stop Calling Me Shirley."
Right. But, well, Robert Stack was a serious actor, but also he also did like comedic acting, like in Airplane. So it was just, I think I probably knew Unsolved Mysteries. I don't know. Did I know Unsolved Mysteries before Airplane? I think so. So I knew him as like, the kind of very serious, somber man with the trench coat. So then I saw Airplane after that, which is a great movie. It's a great comedy, and it's just sort of interesting seeing him in that other role. But anyhow, I will have to watch it. Yeah, it's on my list. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. I will say though, for me, just a throwback. I mentioned we are recording this on July 4th weekend, which for me means watching Jaws for the millionth time, and not really paranormal in nature, but perhaps cryptozoological, perhaps, but not really. But then Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and then Independence Day, And then a whole bunch of other Spielberg movies. Like, I haven't watched E.T. yet, but maybe I'll watch that this weekend. So for me, the summer is intrinsically linked to my childhood and Spielberg, and those are summer movies. And so and then Independence Day was not directed by Spielberg, but I watched that as well, which is just a great summer movie, a great alien invasion movie. It's just fun to go back and revisit some of those. Have you seen all of those? Have you seen Independence Day?
No. No, we talked about this last week. I don't like Will Smith.
Oh, that's right. We did. Yeah. Have you seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
I don't know. I think I might have. That's with the guy, the little short guy. What's his name? Richard
Dreyfuss?
Yes. I think I have seen it.
Okay. Well, it's a great movie.
My dad's best friend looks just like Richard Dreyfuss. It's really funny.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And now your dad's best friend knows that you called him a little short guy.
My dad's best friend definitely does not know how to work podcasts.
Oh, okay. Well, so that means that he's not a Patreon subscriber, and we have those as well. And maybe on this week's Patreon, we can talk about some more weird ranch stuff, or maybe I'll talk a little bit about Roswell if we want to do that, unless we already have a backup story. So, anyhow, well, do you have anything else to say? It's just a weird episode.
No, I feel like I said a lot.
We learned a lot about one another. We shared about your terrible Southern accent and Kushan. Wait, no, Kushu. Kaohsiung. Gesundheit.
If you like NightMerica, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/NightMerica and consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Give us a follow on social media and share this with your friends.
And if you'd like to share your paranormal stories or even seek paranormal advice, which is for entertainment purposes only, email nightmericashow@gmail.com.
Thanks to NightMerica for the amazing episode. Check out the links in the show notes to subscribe. Thanks again for listening to True Crime by Indie Drop-In. If you would like your show featured, reach out to us at Indie Drop-In on all social media or go to indiedropin.com. See you next time.